For a night owl like me, this film is pretty much right up my alley. And yes, Nicolas Cage is once again a vampire.
I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire!
Yes,
I'm a
Nick,
vampire! I'm
we
a
heard you.
vampire! I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire!
Yeah, so, Renfield. This is the story of the sort of side character R.M. Renfield. The R.M. actually stands for Robert Montague. And originally in the book of Dracula, Renfield is stuck in a nut house, claiming that Dracula is his master. Eventually, he breaks free, only to be crippled and eventually killed by Drac. But in later iterations, like the Universal picture and the play, and one of the greatest versions, Dracula Dead and Loving It, Renfield takes more of an active role, becoming Drac's assistant. Well, servant, but still, let's not quibble. This film borrows heavily from the Universal film. Nicolas Cage plays Dracula with subdued menace, a kind of sinister seduction, and when he brings out his trademark Nicolas Cage crazy, that's when he really shines. There are flashbacks which Cage and Holt nail almost perfectly. The scene where Drac introduces himself, and the scene where Renfield is at the bottom of the stairs on the boat, grinning like a crazy person. Awesome. Plus a few extra scenes that show Drac being Drac, which are good. Basically, the story is eventually Drac's proclivities get the attention of some hunters who proceed to nearly destroy him. And it's up to Renfield to get them out of Transylvania, or London, wherever they were at that time, and move to the New World so Drac can heal. Cut to nearly 100 years later, and Drac is nearly on the mend, and Renfield is questioning his devotion. In a similar fashion to when he questioned himself in the book and the play and the movie. But it's not about saving his soul, it's about wanting a normal life. He sees the people he's supposed to take to Drac to be victims, and he wants what they have. Normality. He doesn't want to skulk in the shadows, eating bugs for power, and having to use Drac's blood to heal himself. Both of which are serious plot points. Eventually, he ends up running afoul of a super cop played by Awkwafina, who finally is coming back as Nora from Queens at the end of this month. Yay, I love that show. Her character's dad was killed by mobsters, and she's desperate to bring them to justice. Only she's basically excuse me, she's basically Jim Gordon. She's the only decent cop in a precinct full of corruption, and they're in Louisiana, so there you go. They end up teaming up to stops some mobsters from shooting up the place where Renfield sulks after serving Drac. Because one of the guys he wanted to bring to Drac as food to also help a young woman who's in this therapy group that Renfield audits. Well, he was connected to the mobsters in question, who also killed Aquafina's character's dad, so there's that. And what's worse, her sister's in the FBI, so even with two people trying to fix the precinct, it's not being fixed. So now you know the basic cast of heroes, that is. And of course, Drac. Technically, the main villains are the mobsters, Latin Americans who basically own Louisiana, and the son of the queen of the mob in this town. He ends up eventually becoming Renfield's nemesis, and even though if it's a sort of a Thanos situation, you destroyed my life, I don't even know who you are, that sort of thing. And so eventually Aquafina and Renfield have to fight both corrupt cops and mobsters, and even Dracula himself, who eventually comes to power and decides he wants to take over the world. Of course. And the interaction between the two Nicks is very poignant. Nick Cage's Dracula is a narcissist who always turns around his evil tendencies on his victims, saying, "Oh, it's your fault I'm like this." And Nick Holt's version of Renfield is a classic battered spouse. He truly believes that at times that Drac is the only person who will care for him, even when Drac gets violent. And he is oh so violent. Their relationship it might be painful for some people to watch because it's a little hitting too close to home. But when Renfield starts to assert his not dominance per se, but his self-determination, he shows real power. You feel sorry for the guy, and you want him to succeed, even though, yeah, he's an accomplice to murder spanning almost a century. But truth be told, Drac was doing his thing long before he met Renfield. And while Renfield isn't blameless, he's paid for his crimes in spades, having to kowtow to some jerk. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Renfield, character and plot wise. Effects wise, it was pretty good. I really believe Nicolas Cage was this ancient inhuman thing, and that he could turn into bats and smoke and had the power to literally rip people apart with some fairly Japanese blood effects. I could sort of tell most of the blood effects were CGI, but they were good CGI. Some would say the story's a little weak, but you got to come at it from the perspective of someone in therapy for spousal abuse. This movie could be very therapeutic for some people. Although if you're just looking for vampires versus hunters, then you're out of luck. But if you want to see a character piece about someone who's been tortured for nearly a century, finally finding their spine with a decent bit of action and suspense and gore, you might want to take a bite out of Renfield. This is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, vampires always come with strings when it comes to their dirty deals. And while bugs are a good source of protein, I wouldn't want to go after them regularly. Happy halfway to Halloween. Don't drink and fly.